Assessment is a huge component of education as a whole and the specific day-to-day role of an educator. Assessment is more than just giving tests and taking grades. Let's start by familiarizing ourselves with important terms to know regarding types of assessment. Did you know assessment may occur before instruction even begins? It is helpful for teachers to have an idea of both what students already know and can do, and their knowledge and skill gaps before trying to teach them something new. This way, teachers will really know how to target their instruction to meet students' needs. A universal screener is used to gather data on all students. The purpose is typically to put students into groups, such as intervention groups. A diagnostic assessment, sometimes known as a pre-assessment, is used to identify students' specific strengths and weaknesses. Now let's go over some assessment terms that come up both during and at the end of instruction. Assessments may be informal or formal. Informal assessments happen throughout instruction. While teachers do plan to informally assess their students during instruction, these are flexible assessments that can be easily adjusted to fit the flow of the lesson. A lot of informal assessment occurs through observation. Teachers may notice students' facial expressions and comments during instruction to ascertain their understanding of the material. Teachers may also prompt students to respond to questions using signals, such as thumbs up or thumbs down, or by recording and displaying answers on individual whiteboards for a quick check. Formal assessments can happen both during and after an instructional unit. They are planned ahead of time and involve some type of set scoring guidelines. They include things like quizzes, tests, and projects, or writing assignments scored with some kind of scale or rubric. Now let's talk about the differences between formative and summative assessment. Formative assessments are assessments for learning. They are used to guide instruction, meaning they're administered to assess students' progress toward meeting a learning objective, so teachers can adjust instruction as needed. They help teachers answer the question, what do I teach next? Summative assessments are assessments of learning. They are used to gauge instruction by determining whether or not students mastered a learning objective. Teachers use them to answer the question, what did my students learn? Meaning, what do they know now, or what are they able to do? So remember, formative assessment informs instruction toward the learning objective, while summative assessment sums up students' performance on the learning objective. Let's discuss another pair of assessment terms you should be able to differentiate. Criterion-referenced assessments compare student performance to a predetermined standard, which is a criteria. Scores on these types of tests come in the form of a percentage. Tests administered at the end of an instructional unit and state achievement tests are common examples. Norm-referenced assessments compare students to each other and rank them according to performance. Scores on these types of tests come in the form of a percentile, grade level equivalency, or STAY-9, using a normal bell-shaped curve. Common examples include the Scholastic Aptitude Test, or SAT, and Intelligence Quotient, IQ tests. To sum this up, criterion-referenced assessment looks at how students perform against a set criteria. Norm-referenced assessment looks at how students perform against the normal curve. It is important to note that these terms are not mutually exclusive. For example, diagnostic tests are typically both formal and formative. Summative assessments can be both formal and criterion-referenced, but they can be norm-referenced too. If these terms appear in questions on your exam, determine the purpose of the assessment to guide you to the best answer. What is the goal of the assessment? What does it need to accomplish? Let's go over a few more assessment terms that are important to know. Progress monitoring refers to periodic assessments given to keep track of student growth toward a specific goal or objective. Curriculum-based assessment measures student progress toward mastery of a skill using only materials taken directly from the taught curriculum. Performance-based assessment requires students to apply knowledge or skills acquired in a unit of study. In other words, to perform. The task typically requires high-order thinking skills to be used to complete a process or create a product. Performance-based assessments are typically scored using a rubric or checklist. A portfolio is a collection of student work. Often, the purpose is to show growth over time. Students often select their own pieces to include in the portfolio and include self-reflection. Portfolios are also usually scored using a rubric or checklist. An exit slip, sometimes called an exit ticket, is a short response teachers ask students to complete after a lesson. For example, teachers may have students complete a math problem or use a new vocabulary word in a sentence and turn it in before leaving class or transitioning to the next subject. Again, these terms don't live in a vacuum. A performance-based assessment could be formative if the teacher uses the results to guide the next set of lessons toward the learning objective. Or it could be summative if the process or product students complete is the final assessment of their level of mastery. To reiterate, we need to approach these questions with purpose in mind. Let's try a couple. How could portfolios be used for the purpose of formative assessment in the classroom? Since the portfolios in this scenario should be used as formative assessment, we need to listen for a choice about them informing instruction. A. Students select which pieces to add to the portfolio and write a reflection about each. This sounds like a description of common elements of a portfolio, but it doesn't have anything to do with guiding the teacher's instruction. Student selection and reflection sounds much closer to self-assessment than formative assessment. We can eliminate A. B. The teacher displays the portfolios at open house for parents to see growth throughout the year. Again, we know that showing growth over time is a common purpose of a portfolio, but this choice still doesn't have anything to do with informing the teacher's instruction. Let's eliminate B. C. The teacher scores the portfolios at the end of the instructional unit using a rubric. While it is common for portfolios to be scored with a rubric, end of the instructional unit is a big clue that this is not a description of formative assessment. The portfolios are being used for summative assessment in choice C. Let's eliminate it. D. The teacher reads through the portfolios weekly before planning the next week's instruction. There we go. The fact that the teacher checks the portfolios at regular intervals before planning instruction lets us know they're being used as formative assessment in this choice. Let's select choice D. Ready for one more? When might a teacher use a norm-referenced assessment? A. To form small groups for targeted intervention. B. To determine if students mastered state grade level standards. C. To identify the potential need for additional academic support. D. To plan instruction based on identified gaps in learning. We know that norm-referenced means that students are ranked or compared to each other. Let's find the answer choice that reflects this. Forming small groups for targeted instruction sounds like it's done through criterion-referenced assessment. You have to know what set criteria you're targeting for intervention to begin. You also have to know which students are struggling with the specific skills to inform who needs to be in the targeted group. Let's move on. Determining whether or not students mastered grade level standards also sounds like criterion-referenced assessment. The state standards are a set criteria. Let's look at our next choice. Since norm-referenced assessment ranks students based on performance, we can use it to see the lowest performing students. We don't know what they're struggling with, but we do know they're performing below their peers. Norm-referenced assessment can be used to identify which students may need additional academic support. Let's select it, but also look at our next choice to make sure we've picked the best one. The planning part of choice D sounds like formative assessment, and the identified gaps in learning aligns with some kind of pre-assessment, like a diagnostic test. We can feel confident that C is the right choice for when a teacher might use a norm-referenced assessment.